Daniel Gleason is a native of Western Massachusetts. He earned a BA in philosophy from the University of Massachusetts Amherst and MS in human development from Wheelock College. Daniel has held a variety of positions across a few industries and started working in higher education in 2009 as an adjunct instructor of human development. He eventually developed more interest in the field of advising while working at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas. Having gained experience in educational technology, he started his current position at California State University Long Beach in 2014 to assist the implementation of their e-advising tools. As his position has grown, he's been an integral part of CSULB's well-recognized coordinated care network. Daniel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
We are delighted to get the opportunity to chat to you, Daniel. And when we chat to guests, one of the things we like to do is, I suppose, get to know you and give our listeners the opportunity to get to know you. And as Matt outlined in your bio, you worked, not just in higher ed, but in different spaces. Could you, suppose, talk to us a little bit about how you found the route into higher ed and how you found yourself where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the interesting things about my career trajectory is that I started in the very early beginning of education. And I was a preschool teacher. So when I started I got my degree in philosophy, and I went to work for an organization that was more of a social services network in my local community. And I worked as a home visitor, going out to families' homes and really working with parents about developmental education for their young kids. And through that experience, I really got interested in human development, and eventually applied and went to grad school in Boston, Massachusetts. I did an internship at at the time it was called the Office for Child Care Services. They're big kind of licensing organization throughout the state. I kind of pivoted a little bit very briefly into mental health, working with kids. I didn't last very long in that field, only because, I just determined it really wasn't for me. I think in the position that I was in at that time, working with kids that were really experiencing some real trauma in their lives, I just, from my own emotional state, I couldn't really do it. So I ended up, I made another pivot at that point. I mean, this is, obviously I'm talking here and we're talking, years of time, but, I made another pivot, and I started working at a large yoga and meditation center in Western Massachusetts. It's called the Kripalu Center for Yoga and Meditation. Arguably the largest of its type in the country. People from all across the country and the world would go there to learn how to become yoga teachers, learn about meditation, other kinds of programming. And, at that time I was going through my own self-discovery of who I wanted to be. And, it was really a kind of a pivotal moment for me, but that is sort of where I actually first got the taste of technology and technology in business applications. So as I was working there, I was kind of tapped to be brought into this project where they were renewing all of their software, like all of their guest services software, all of their technology. And I was in a role as kind of like a super user, where I was in my department and I was learning how to use it and training others how to use it and doing documentation. And I had like another job as part of that too. But that's kind of where I first really got into that technology bug. And as I was there for a couple of years, life took me to California for the first time. And that was, I think, at about, I want to say that was like 2007. And I ended up meeting a woman, and I got married shortly after that. Kind of this whirlwind romance, but yeah. So that's how I first ended up in California. Now, I was only there for about a year before my wife and I ended up moving to Beaumont, Texas. And in Beaumont, Texas is where I really started working in higher ed. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the organization I worked for, the institution, was a SUNY institution. It was Empire State College, which is part of the State University of New York, their system. And I was just doing adjunct teaching, human development. I also I got in a full-time job in the local area with a small educational publishing company. And so, again, some technology focus there, creating educational materials for like elementary school, middle school, for for their standardized testing and so forth. And at that time, it was like the 2010, 2011 era. And the economy was crashing at that time. It was it was a really bad time for our economy. And the company I was working for, there was a layoff basically, and I was part of that. So my wife was working at that university, Lamar University. She's an instructor. We're a faculty member there. And I had applied to a bunch of jobs, and I ended up getting a job working with the learning communities at that institution. So there was a few different learning communities, and it wasn't really very established at the time. But I was able to convince them that I would be good for the job, and so they hired me. And yeah, I started that position, and so I was, working, coordinating these learning communities, and working with like student mentors. But then, as part of that job, I was doing advising for the students in the learning community, and I think that really was maybe that was maybe my first exposure to like real pure advising. And yeah, I loved it. I loved working with students at that age. And kind of looking back at my own experience of being a college student, and kind of knowing what I did right, what I did wrong, and kind of being able to be like, it's your life, but from my experience, there's a couple pathways you could take, and here's my recommendation. That kind of like type of mentorship or advising. After a little while in that position, my wife and we did move back to California. So this was 2014. And I was applying all over the place to different universities in Southern California. And I happened to land the job at Cal State Long Beach. Eadvising coordinator was the first position I held. So DeJuan Jackson, who I know was a guest on your podcast before, was my supervisor, and she hired me. And so, in those early days, 2014, Cal State Long Beach had, about I think a year prior, Cal State Long Beach had applied for a few grants for new e-advising systems. And those e-advising systems, I mean, this was like the wild, wild west of that kind of stuff. I mean, it wasn't as widespread as it is now. And so it was all very new, and I was learning. They were, everyone was learning at the same time, basically. But we, over a few years, we built out our structure, and and things developed from there. I mean, EAB, right? We're all kind of familiar with EAB. Their product has changed over the years, from 2014 to present. And, through those changes, I've been in a pretty interesting role to facilitate that, to help implement that. I'd say about 2 years ago, I did kind of change my job a little bit, and I became more focused on the project management, because originally, in that e-advising coordinator role, I was doing active advising. Like, I was meeting with students regularly, and also working with the e-advising systems, and some colleagues as well. But after a few years, the project management really kind of took over for me, like as far as interest. And not that I lost interest in advising. I think I see myself, even though I don't directly advise, as much, or even at all these days. I feel like what I do is facilitating in a lot of ways, helping facilitate the act of advising, and supporting it through the coordinated care network, through different kinds of initiatives, progress reports, data analytics. So even though I'm not on the ground, I'm in the community. I train all the advisors, and I also do the policy training for our academic policy. So I'm very much in that world. It's just it's a little bit of a different look for me these days. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, so I definitely we're going to have a lot to talk about with data analytics, kind of maybe the progression of your job, starting at Long Beach as the advising coordinator to your title now, and what you do with the program management. But for those that may not know too much about Cal State Long Beach, they probably have heard about CSULB, but how would you describe Cal State Long Beach, and even going into like the advising structure? Are you in a decentralized, centralized advising?
Yeah, so Cal State Long Beach is, I don't know if we're the largest of the system. I think we might be. I don't know. Fullerton and us, I think we kind of trade off one year. They're bigger, one year we're bigger. But I think, Cal State Long Beach is one of the larger campuses. It is very close to the chancellor's office in Long Beach. And so I think that proximity, I don't, I don't know if we would be considered the flagship. I don't, and I don't feel that way necessarily, but like, I think the proximity, there is that kind of relationship with the CO and, just having that kind of partnership. We are a decentralized advising structure. So there are college advising centers, as well as the University Center for Undergraduate Advising, which is my home office, the UCUA, University Center for Undergraduate Advising. There's also some other kind of supplemental, like EOP, the Educational Opportunity Program. The TRIO programs have their advising unit. So we have, some colleges have faculty advisors, so there's some mixed model going on where like advising center, but also faculty advisors for when you get later on into your academics. The university, diverse. I think again, a lot of engagement with students, faculty, staff. It's a really, I'm happy to be there. It's a really interesting place to be. And I think what I like about it is we are always trying to push the envelope, for different kinds of initiatives on the e-advising front for sure, but also in other areas as well. So, kind of like that. I like kind of being on that cutting edge as much as we can be.
Daniel, you mentioned earlier that you were hired by Dawn Jackson, and that she was a guest all the way back on episode 13, Exploring Pathways to Leadership. She was fantastic, some really great insights into leadership. But I suppose interested in hearing, from you in terms of what it was like to work with Dawn and maybe what you learned from her.
Absolutely. Dawn Jackson is, arguably one of the most amazing facilitators of advising that I've met. And I don't even know if that's the best way to put it. She was a role model for me, for one. And she always provided me with enough room to do what I needed to do, but also enough guidance to not mess it up, or not like blow it up. Right. She was always there when I had any kind of crisis, not, crisis, we're talking about a crisis in a very, very low scale kind of a way here, but any sort of, issues that came up or, just questions that I had. And so she was just always very approachable. Over the years, her and we developed a really good working relationship, and I would say a friendship too. We became, close. So when she went off to the chancellor's office, it was not, my happiest day, but happy for her, because I think what she brings to the entire CSU is something that is probably unparalleled. And I'm not being superfluous with that. I think it's really an accurate statement there.
Yeah, and we're going to make sure to share this episode with Dawn so she can listen to all the great information that you have, but also the comments that you have, the great comments that you have about Dawn. Now, also at Long Beach, you've talked about first starting as the e-advising coordinator and now as the e-advising project lead and trainer. Can you talk about like kind of that progression in terms of like when you started, kind of what your role entailed as the coordinator and how advising was incorporating into your role now?
Yeah, so in the beginning with as the e-advising coordinator, the idea behind that position was that whoever was in that position would be working as an advisor on the ground, so that they could really intimately know how the tools work, right? So you're using it every day and you're seeing like how it works or how it doesn't work, and then the taking that information and then going back to our leadership team and the kind of the implementation team at the time and saying to them like, it's working great this way, not really working great this way. I think maybe we need to add a category, or we need to include this other data that maybe is not there. And so, for the first couple of years, that's a lot of what I did. Is I would, I was doing working, using the tools, doing training others on how to use them, creating all the documentation and all that kind of stuff, and then working with that larger team to really, hone in on the system. And as we implemented new bells and whistles or new functionality, we always did that very intentionally. Always at a pace that felt, okay, at a pace that wasn't like overwhelming. I mean, it may have been overwhelming at times, but I think in retrospect, it was all well timed. So our leadership changed a little bit over those years, and so Lynn Mahoney was our, I guess I'm not exactly sure what her position was at the time. I mean, the exact title of her position, but she was in a very important role with the implementation of Eadvising. I mean, she was one of the two people that brought it to the campus. So Lynn Mahoney, who now is the president of San Francisco State University, and Enders, who is another incredible individual who was fairly well known in the CSU. Between those two, they really brought the whole movement, I think, to the CSU. So, but there was changeover. I mean, they went on to bigger, better things, and it almost was like not that there was like a void, but that there was we needed someone that was driving things forward, and I'm not claiming that person was exactly me, but I was really interested in moving forward with the technology. I got really into it, and so working with Dwan and our AVP at the time, and just really trying to suggest, like, here are things that we could be doing. I think at that time too, the CSU was starting to adopt it more. Other campuses were, so there was more of a little bit of a community going on. And and I mean, eventually, my role just kind of changed into that more of a project management, and this, I think, really did when the concept of the coordinated care became more of a relevant thing, right? And this is part of the EAB changing their functionality. They acquired Grades First, and that brought in appointment scheduling into that platform. And then their coordinated care with care units and alerts and cases, progress reports became part of it. And so, yeah, I think that's really where I don't know if I just kind of stepped into that role, or, I mean, I wanted it to happen. So I advocated for myself to make that happen for myself, I guess is the best way to put it. But I had the support. I mean, Dwan was supportive of that. And there really wasn't anyone on campus that, I guess, either wanted to do it or that was in a position to do it because there are other responsibilities. And so I ended up there, and I'm thrilled. I love doing it.
Yeah, we can hear the interest in the passion, which is fantastic. I suppose we probably have listeners who are very familiar with e-advising and e-advising tools. For listeners who might not be as familiar, can you talk to us, I suppose, a little bit about like what you mean when you talk about e-advising tools and how you go about using them in your role and at the institution?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think, and that term e-advising tools has changed over time. I think when we talk about it right now, we kind of talk about it in maybe 2 or 3 different areas. So the first, and maybe the biggest, is the EAB tool. So their SSC Navigate, the Smart Guidance. Different campuses may call it something different, but EAB, the company, and then SSC Navigate, I think, is that's the tool. So that tool is comprised of a few different components, or pillars, call them. You've got the strategic care. All right, so that's your care units. you've got the intelligence, which is the data analytics, and then you've got the smart guidance, which is the degree planning. And EAB, they're breaking into that world very fast. But prior to them, I mean, there's other degree planners, degree audits and degree planners that exist, and we've been on a planner called the Smart Planner for, well, since that one was one that when I started in 2014, we had that one, we were using it, we still use it. And so that tool is designed really to help students just visualize and see what requirements they have to complete to graduate. So there is a degree audit, which looks at things kind of retroactively. So like, these are your requirements that you've completed. It also does tell you what's left, but the degree planner gives a student kind of like a semester by semester breakdown of, this is what's left. So it includes major requirements, GEs, electives if necessary. And that tool really, I think by design, is meant to eliminate the anxiety students have about, when am I going to graduate, or what should I take next semester? And I want to connect this back to advising, because I think that's important, because advising should not just be about schedule planning, right? I mean, we probably all agree this. So having a tool like a degree planner gives you that space to have other conversations. You don't have to have your entire meeting, 15, 30 minutes does not have to be about what classes to take. It can be about, what are you interested in? What are you struggling with? How can I help you, right? Those kinds of really important advising topics can take precedence over the, you need to take course A, B, and C. You know what I mean? So there's that. Going back to the EAB side of things. With the data analytics, that's always been interesting to me. And I think with some campuses, it can take on forms in different kinds of ways. On our campus, to be completely honest, we've not really embraced it as much as we've embraced other kinds of functionality. And I think it's hard when you work, in academia, with something with data analytics. I think it's hard for people to really accept what it's doing, right? It's taking data, numbers, figures, factors, and it's generating a potential outcome. And the thing that I have my issue with it, and not that I don't think it doesn't have a place, but my issue with it is that in no way does it acknowledge the human spirit and the human capacity to thrive and overcome obstacles. It just basically gives you essentially an analysis of the past. It's looking at historical data and predicting, or trying to predict, what a student X, Y, or Z what may happen to them, right? But again, it doesn't acknowledge anything that is human. And I think this is the disconnect with advising, because advising is about what's human. And there's obviously a lot of number crunching and data that we incorporate that, and we use that on a regular basis. But the core of advising is human. And so I think that's the disconnect there. And, as I mentioned, I think that data analytics has a place. I think it's really useful for looking at high level trends, high level, or departmental kinds of insights. But when you really drill down to the individual student, I think it becomes really murky. And I think other people recognize that, right? So there's that. The coordinated care network, though, is, I feel like, where a lot of the value for our campus at Cal State Long Beach, I feel like that's where a lot of the value comes. And I feel like that's where we get our money's worth with the tool, right? We're paying X amount of dollars for this tool. And I feel like the coordinated care is where we can get the return on investment, the most return on investment. So coordinated care on our campus consists of different kinds of care units, and care units are basically areas where students can get support. That could be academic advising, it could be tutoring, academic coaching. We've got our enrollment services, our financial aid, and our records divisions in there. We've got our veterans in there. We've got writing support. And coming soon, we're going to have our career development center, which is really exciting. So it allows students to access the resources in one place right? So they don't have to go to multiple systems to get help. They can go to one place. They can look for the type of support they need, and they can find out when, they can schedule appointments. They can find out when drop-in times are. Um, and so for students, I think that's really helpful. On the behind the scenes, though, what's happening with that is, and maybe shifting back towards data analytics, is the data warehouse, where we can query the system through the advanced search, and we can identify students who need support, either by, based on different kinds of metrics, GPAs, units, the courses they took, or the courses they didn't pass, all kinds, their academic standing. We can use that data warehouse to query the system, and we can generate lists of students that we want to reach out to. Now, and it's not that simple. It's not just like you generate a list, you reach out to the student, and you're done. There's a level of you've got to look at that list of students, and you've got to review and kind of see where things are going, because it's more nuanced, right? It's not just here's a list of students, right? It's like, here's a list of students. Now you got to find out what's going on with all these students, and that takes time. And so the tool, I think, shortens the time, because you can get your list of students where before you'd have to, scour through manual transcripts or, other kinds of manual Excel spreadsheets, whatever. This tool makes that happen a lot quicker, but you still have to take the time to review that and to determine, like, okay, this student does really need some sort of outreach. And if they do, then we're gonna do our best to do that outreach. And so we can use appointment campaigns, we can do progress reports, we can issue alerts, and use case management type functionality to support those students. So it's cross collaborative with different departments, different divisions, and I think the future of this. I don't know what the future will look like, but I think the future of this is something in the realm of like AI, chatbots, right? So those are becoming more prevalent. I mean, we just got our first chatbot recently. It's not focused on advising yet, but I think in the future that could potentially be something that will be. So yeah, it's an exciting time. We'll see how it unfolds.
Yeah, I mean, technology is here to stay, and it's always changing, and even like the chatbot, I mean, it can be a great addition to kind of like a flipped model in a sense where, maybe some
Mm-hmm.
of those quick questions could get answered, or there might be incorporated with modules that students do. So that way, yeah, when you do have these appointments, you spend more time on what needs to be discussed versus like going over like, this is how you register for a class, or this is how you do, this or that. But I do like that you talked about how advising, yeah, it's the human spirit. Yes, we have these e-advising tools, we have the data analytics, but it's all meant to help support advising and not replace advising or the actual person meeting with the student. But Long Beach has always kind of been ahead of the game, and I think in one of the I think it was one of the interviews that you, Dewan, I think Dr. Carrie Johnson were on with CSU Long Beach's Beach TV. Dr. Johnson had talked about how CSU Long Beach leads the way in the CSU, and this is at 2019. I would imagine it's kind of still the same, and that was in the top 10 in the country with high tech usage. And over this last over a year, we've had the pandemic. How has technology or e-advising tools, I guess, helped, or has anything changed during this time prior to the pandemic, during the pandemic, or even looking after the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic changed everything, right? I mean, and that's cliche to say at this point, because we're still in it, really. But I think for let's say advising, or for academia, for Cal State Long Beach, it really forced us to look at how we can really reach students in a virtual space. And so, I mean, in those early weeks and months, back in March and April of 2020, I mean, we brought our tutoring centers all online. So our tutoring centers they operated, but students could not schedule their own appointments. They could go in, they could make an appointment through someone, face to face or all that, but they weren't allowed to go online and schedule. So pretty quickly, and I mean, the semester was at the end point there, but we, for over the summer, we prepared so that when we came back in the fall of 2020, that students would be able to schedule their tutoring appointments online. And so that was a big thing that we did. And I mean, we weren't really planning on doing it that way, but the pandemic forced us to make that change faster than we had anticipated. We also brought in different kinds of alerts, that we could use for like case management. We brought in our financial aid and our records into the system so that students, again, could access those more easily through our, we call it Beach Connect on our campus, through Beach Connect. And I just think in general, utilizing some of the advanced search features to, again, as I was talking about a few moments ago, about like the data warehouse and querying that so that you can identify the students that are off track. I think that happened on a more robust kind of level. And what I think I've seen is we had more touch points with students in terms of like behind the scenes. So like we were like doing a lot more of like reviewing student records and making sure that students were on track, and only really trying to meet with those students that like were absolutely necessary. Now, if a student came to us and they needed to meet with us, of course, like that meeting will happen. But I think before, when we were on campus, it was easier to meet with students. Well, and now that I say this, the pandemic has shown it's actually easier to meet with students virtually. I mean, that's actually the truth. But I think the work of doing it was a little harder in the beginning. As in the beginning of the pandemic, it's gotten easier over time, and so it changed everything, but it also allowed us to like reframe like how we go about the business of advising. And I mean, some things also stayed the same too. Like, I mean, the core of advising didn't really change, just the delivery and maybe how we approached it changed. So, I mean, yeah, I like to say we're on the cutting edge, and I like to say that we were, in the top. I mean, I think it's true to a certain extent, but it's not really a competition either. I mean, especially with the CSU, I mean, we have a really great community in the CSU. And I mean, there are folks that, colleagues of mine, Matt, yourself, and other folks, across the state that have come up with some really great ideas about advising and e-advising. And so I love that. I love hearing from other people. And I've always been really keen on self-reflection. And I'm never the one to think we can't do it better. Like we can always do something better. We can always think about things differently. And I would never shy away from that. So I think the pandemic kind of brought that out too in a lot of ways.
Yeah, continuous improvement is definitely a good thing to strive for. And Daniel, I'm thinking about like what you're talking about in terms of the touch points for students and the way, I suppose, in which students utilize institutions. They don't see maybe the internal divisions that we see between advising, student affairs. And you gave a presentation, Blurred Lines, Academic Advising Meets Career Counselling. I suppose I think that was kind of utilizing again kind of advising tools and kind of technology. Just interested, I suppose, in in terms of that, like, do you see like from learnings from the pandemic is that something that could be further built upon do you think, given what you guys have done in terms of at the institution with advising and kind of career counseling?
Yes, I think, with any large organization where you have different departments and different divisions, there is a level of, call it like territorialism, right? Like we do this, you do that. Even though we all have the same goal, we all have the same place, our mission is the same, and I hate the term silo, but it's like, that's kind of what it is. Like you've got people in different areas, they do their thing, you do yours. I feel at Cal State Long Beach, I mean, we do the best we can to break that down, to be cross departmental and functional. And I think the example that you gave about the career counseling is a great one, because at our campus, and this is different in other places, but at our campus, career counseling lives in student affairs and advising lives in academic affairs. And so how do you reconcile those two? I mean, we're both there to do, I mean, we do different jobs. We're there to support each other, right? And so I think it's interesting because I had been working with this group for years, and I wanted to I wanted for them, I wanted you guys to, I want you career counselors to use this tool just for student information. Like, there's a lot of data here. You can put notes in here. Whatever you put in there, we can see it. So we know like what you're talking about with students. And they were not, I mean, they were very receptive. So it's not like it was barriers that way, but it was like they had their own system, right? They had their own tool. They use a tool called CareerLink, and that was their tool. And the students made their appointments there, and they had their job postings there. And I mean, so to kind of bridge that, I really had to convince them and show them that the benefit here is, first of all, the student, right? If the student has access to the services in one place, they might be more likely to utilize those services. And so I tried to, over time, I met with them, and we talked about different things. And I would say actually the tipping point was when we started doing referrals through Beach Connect. So if an advisor wanted to refer a student to the Career Development Center, they could do that through Beach Connect. They could set an alert. It would go to someone in the Career Development Center who would receive it, and it opened a case. And then the Career Development Center would reach out to that student, say, hey, come and make an appointment with us. And hopefully the student would do that, go in there. And if they did, we would be able to know. We would say the case would be closed, and so we would know that referral was successful. Because before, you would make a referral, and you would say, go to the Career Development Center. You never knew. You never knew if they made it there, right? And so the ability to track those referrals, I think, was the tipping point, because I think then the folks on the career development side, they started to see the value of having the students in, using the tool and having the students in the same place. And and eventually, they agreed that they would come on to our, not our side, but they would come on to Beach Connect and allow students to make appointments through their system. And it was, to their credit, I mean, for them, it's change management. I mean, they've got to, now they're essentially managing two systems, because their previous system, it does things that Beach Connect EAB doesn't do, right? The employer relations side of things, right? So we had to reconcile that. But I think anytime, and I think this is where technology is really fascinating, because it really does allow you to cut through divisions. Like, it's not like you do this, I do that. It's, we can all do the same stuff in the same pond, right? And so it's just like, it's a medium. It's a conduit almost,
Yeah, and I think it kind of even goes back to when you were talking about like when you first started, kind of how it was like the Wild Wild West with some of these like tools, and kind of convincing departments or individuals like the benefits of it and how it can be incorporated. I know at CSUSB, when we got EAB or SSC at the time before it changed over to SSC Navigate, it was like, why should I have this? And really trying to convince people why we had it. And it just all really comes back to the communication. But I think it's also that whenever some of these products are purchased, it's like, make sure you bring everyone to the table that could have some type of comment or suggestion for it. Because I know there some institutions, mine included, that there are some products that were just purchased on a whim, it almost seems like. And then it's like, well, now that we have it, you need to use it. And it's like, wait, but why? So yeah, but nowadays, years later now, it seems like a lot more people are on board with utilizing a lot of these and incorporating it into their daily work, whether it's in advising or student affairs or whatnot. Now, kind of shifting gears a little bit, you also teach at Cal State Long Beach, the Career and Personal Explorations class. Can you talk more about that course? Is it for a specific group of students? What the learning outcomes are?
Yeah, so that course, career and personal explorations, as you said, it's actually a GE course, and it's category E, lifelong learning. Um, and that course, it's in the College of Education, um, and the University Center for Undergraduate Advising has partnered with the the ASEC department, the Advanced Studies of Education and Counseling. Um, we've partnered with them, and this has been probably, I think, I want to say 4 years, 4 years going here. We partnered with them to have some sections for undeclared students. And myself and some colleagues of mine, we've had the ability to teach this course. And what we do with this is, because these sections are specifically reserved for undeclared students, we've kind of tailored it so we use it as a way to really help those students who are undeclared, really help them figure out like what it is you want. And by that I mean, like, what are your goals? What are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? And then once you kind of establish those kind of like high-level things, then let's take that down and let's drill down into, okay, these are the steps that you might need to take to get there. And very simple stuff like choosing a major, right? So how do you choose a major? Well, what are you interested in? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What kind of what kind of a career do you want would inform your major? But also you should understand that a lot of times your major does not equal your career, right? I'm a philosophy major. I mean, I feel like I use my training every day, but I'm certainly not a philosopher, right? So I think it's having to like help students recognize that it's really about the skills you attain in the pursuit of your degree. And any degree will give you a certain amount of skills. Some degrees, some degrees and some majors will give you certain skills, but there's also like a basic set of skills that you should learn, right? And that's kind of where general education comes in, right? So the course, we designed it so that we kind of work through that process with these students. And I mean, I love that opportunity because, and especially now because I am not doing as much advising, and so it gives me the opportunity to really have that contact with students, which is something I do love it. And so that kind of fills that void for me right now. We've worked with a couple of different curriculums, I guess. Yeah, we've worked with a few different curriculums. Last year we kind of abandoned all the existing stuff that we had, and we just kind of decided that, because it was all virtual, we basically had to teach these through Zoom. And we did different kinds of like asynchronous, synchronous type models. But we just had decided like, we're just going to build our course the way we want, because we used the curriculum. It was like an established curriculum, and it was not bad. It just, I think a few of us were like, well, it's okay here, but this aspect we don't like. And so we just kind of took what we liked, but we just built it out on our own way, how we wanted it. And so we're kind of like a little group where we talk, we have a similar, I mean, we have some flexibility, right? Like I can teach it how I want. My colleague can do what he or she wants. But our objectives and our learning outcomes are kind of the same. And so it's really identifying, what the students' goals are, helping them understand how to achieve those goals, and then, kind of helping them just determine like, the major, because the major is one of the hinge points with that. We want them to really focus on like, what major do you want, but also understanding like things can change. Like you can say to me today, I want to do this. And then a week from now, or a year from now gets a little cagier, but like, you can change your mind, right? That's okay. And so, yeah, it's a really good experience. I think, I mean, I hope the students like it. I don't know. I've never looked at my rate, my professor. So if you've ever seen it, don't tell me. I don't want to know.
Well, I think your willingness to kind of tear up the curriculum and build it again is yet another example of, continuous improvement and your dedication to that. And I have no doubt that there'll be kind of listeners out there who want to get in touch with you to kind of learn more about kind of e-advising and different tools and best practice and things like that. If listeners want to get in touch with you, is there a way they can do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say just email Daniel.Gleason. So that's Gleason and at csulb.edu. I think if you Google Daniel Gleason CSULB, you'll probably, Google these days, you can just do about just anything with it. So, yeah, I'm out there. I certainly, would not discourage anyone from reaching out if they chose to. More than happy to talk.
The only danger when you're Googling your name is they may get Donald Gleason, the actor, and vice versa. But I have no doubt, Daniel, that listeners will want to reach out. And I just want to say thank you for taking the time to chat to myself and Matt. It's been really interesting to get some insights into the work that you're doing, and just to wish you continued success in your career.
Thank you both so much. Really, this was really fun to do. So thanks again.